Hi and welcome to Hospitality Huddles. I'm Scott Turner and each episode we'll be uncovering the industry's biggest challenges and serving up the solutions to help overcome them. We're bringing together some of the best thought leaders in the industry and finding some of the most creative minds shaping the future of hospitality from all around the world. They're going to share insights tackling the pain points operators just like you face every day. Hospitality Huddles is more than a podcast, it's a community of passionate individuals who appreciate the art and science of hospitality and want to help answer the difficult questions. If you like the show, one of the best ways to support us is to hit that subscribe button and leave a review. It's only going to take a couple of minutes and it really does make the difference. So let's get on with today's episode, and all that's left to say is welcome to Hospitality Huddles, where hospitality meets conversation, one huddle at a time. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Hospitality Huddles, and today I'm joined by a great guest and we're going to talk about branding and websites and storytelling when it comes to your hotel and F&B operations. So Omar, really glad to have you on the show. Welcome, and I'm looking forward to the chat today.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I'm looking forward to it as well.
Awesome. So we always start with one question, which is, what does hospitality mean to you? And I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I love that question. Hospitality to me is really about care and service, and personally for me, family. I've been blessed to have been able to travel when I was younger with my family across Europe and the Middle East. So I've had some really beautiful experiences there. And I always took notice of really the care that people had when I was traveling for myself and for my family. So that really sticks out to me. Of course, you know, having transformative experiences as well, things that change you, things that shape you, things that teach us. That's really what hospitality means to me personally.
Yeah, that's a great story. And we met on LinkedIn. I've followed some of your stuff on LinkedIn. But for those people who don't know you, just take 60 seconds to tell them about you, what your background is, and then what you're doing now with Studio Circa.
Absolutely, yeah. So my background is in branding and design, and now with Studio Circa, we're an agency focused on the hospitality industry, so F&B and hotels, and we really are directing our energies towards helping hotels create more engaged guests, connect with their guests emotionally through strategy, design, brand, and copywriting, and then obviously on the website side, we really want to drive more direct bookings, capture the guest experience from start to finish, and foster loyalty in the long term.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we're going to touch on websites a little bit later because it's one of my big beefs is how a lot of hotels, particularly big hotel groups, kind of put their amenities as a secondary thought to the bedroom proposition as well. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. But in terms of the challenges and the pain points that you can help with Studio Circa solve, what's some of the reoccurring themes that you see in terms of challenges that people have with whether that's putting their hotel proposition out into the marketplace effectively, whether that is websites, whether that's the story that goes with the hotel in terms of messaging the complete experience? What's some of those things that you help with the most?
Yeah, it's a big question. There's a lot of different touch points, and that's what's so intriguing about hotels and design and branding for hotels. A lot of the things that we see are, you know, we primarily focus on independent and boutique properties. So smaller properties, a lot of the time family owned and family led. Yeah, there's just a huge discrepancy sometimes between what the brand is aiming to be and the service they provide on site. So they might have amazing hospitality on site, but they're not showing that and telling the story on their websites. So that's a huge point. And going back to what you mentioned about the rooms being the primary selling point for a lot of properties. Yeah, you know, rooms are important. You're going to be sleeping there. People want to know that they're comfortable and safe and they have the right amenities, but people buy on emotion and buy on experience, especially related to travel. And if you're not telling the right story specific to the guest that's planning to come to you and your positioning as well, then there's a missed opportunity there to really not just sell like a feature in quotes, but actually sell the emotion and the journey and the transformation that they have. So this all weaves into branding, strategy, messaging, and in our case, the initial touch point of the website, where people will really be looking to discover more about the property and not just the room. So there's a big missed opportunity there. And something you talk about a lot as well, from your posts and kind of the content that you create, is engaging the local community in a way that what we're calling kind of brand extension. So you have a certain positioning for your brand and for your property, and you can kind of capitalize on that through the website, but actually extending out to the local community not just shows that you care and have an impact on the local community and engages it, but also solidifies the brand that you are building. So there's a really good opportunity to extend the brand in certain ways and actually capitalize on opportunities that will create more richness for the brand and, in many cases, the F&B offering.
Yes, there's some really good ones. And I guess working with independents and boutique hotels, the challenge of being out in the market and being seen is obviously a difficult one, isn't it? So it's really all those little touch points that you're talking about make a big difference to standing out from some of the bigger chains that probably people naturally lean towards directly. But there is an opportunity for boutique hotels. I certainly see that when, if you're booking through booking.com or some of the online channels. Mr. and Mrs. Smith is another great one. Some of the boutique hotels really can stand out, can't they, for that personalized service and experience. So how do you see that coming across in websites? Is it through the storytelling? Is it video? Is it interviews with the team? How can they just do things a little bit differently to some of the chains that might run on a set format?
Yeah, there's a great opportunity there. Like you said, I think the chains, the blue chip properties, let's say, they kind of have a set formula and have their ways. They have SOPs and guides on how you can build the website, the type of imagery, the type of the copywriting you can do. So the independents actually have a great opportunity for flexibility and creativity that the chains don't. In that sense, they might have less financing and less capital, but the actual attraction from the guest to the property is actually a bigger opportunity there. So that's actually why we focus on that kind of property, because we're creative. This is what we focus on. This is what we do. We build brands, and those brands that can use the most help are the independents and the small boutique hotels.
And do you find those guys are usually more innovative, more open to ideas? Because I had Heather Cox on here, social media manager, and she was saying that where she works the best is where she's just allowed carte blanche to go. Let's really push the boundaries of what we're doing on social media, but the return on investment is huge. So do you get that a lot more with independents and boutique people? Because I remember, so I worked for Intercontinental, and I remember how prescriptive they were over the website, even down to the point of what you could say about the restaurants. That you had to have the opening times like high up on the landing page of the F&B. You had to have link throughs to the menus that kind of went nowhere in a way. So I guess, is that where the USP can come from, the independence, is being able to really push those boundaries?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, they have this opportunity there to really direct the guest in the way that they want to and tell the narrative through the website experience. There isn't kind of a set formula or a set structure, although of course there's recommendations of what are best practices and things that do well and information guests are looking for. But in terms of how it's executed, that's really the power where independent and boutique hotels, their power lies, is because there's no rules per se. So you can kind of do what you want and attract people the way that you want. And it's a great opportunity. And I think, yes, the smaller hotels, smaller independent hotels, I think they're more open to that kind of discussion and more trusting in their partners who are handling those things, because smaller properties tend to be, ownership maybe is less involved in those kind of decisions, and there's less structure around that. So they need a partner to help them out with it. And there's more trust in that relationship. So there's more creativity to be used, and there's also someone who will bring in that creativity as well.
So where I'm really interested in this is when you start working with a client and you've got a hotel that's there ready to come out of the foundations and be created. what's the process that you guys go through with hoteliers when you first sit down and kind of look at what their story is, what their brand kind of exonifies out to the marketplace? And then how does that kind of then lead everything else that goes into the decision? Because I guess the best way you guys work is getting involved really early in the process and almost hand holding them through everything from design, build, all the way to experience, I guess, at the end of it, right?
Yeah, that's the ideal case. A lot of the time, uh, the contact we make with our clients is usually website uplifts or brand uplifts, where there's already a presence and it needs some love and attention, which we love to do as well. But of course, having that kind of co-evolution with our clients from the beginning, where we walk them through kind of a strategy workshop where we really define the concept, what's unique, what kind of guests are you looking to attract, what things do they find meaningful, because that can inform a lot of the process throughout, even on site. So for example, the type of coffee table books you put in the bedrooms should speak to the guest profile that you're trying to attract. So we don't do interior design, but we have a network of people who we work with and can refer out to. But the foundational strategy is key because that will inform every little touch point across the process and creates this really unified, holistic experience that guests are looking for.
Yeah, and I guess, one of the things I always like plead with hoteliers to do is to not work on F&B too early. Because my theory on that is if, an average hotel starts getting built 2 or 3 years out, by the time it gets to opening, whatever was on trend 2 or 3 years ago has moved on, and you're already behind the times. And I always kind of use the example that independent restaurant people can open a restaurant in 8 to 12 weeks. So to make that decision as late as possible is only going to help elevate the offer than the other way. When it comes to a hotel, that literally cannot happen when you think about everything that goes into the infrastructure before then you start even looking at design and build. So how do you work with clients so that you are putting touch points in that can kind of stand the test of time and don't kind of date as it gets closer to opening? Because that must be a consideration when you're working with clients, right?
Yeah, it definitely is. I think that's why the core foundational strategy is key, because generally that's not going to change within the next 10 to 15 years, ideally. So when you have the core strategy there, you have kind of characteristics and attributes and touch points and emotions that you want the guest to feel and engage with on property and throughout the experience, whether it's the website or the wayfinding is done a certain way or the menus are done a certain way. Those tactical things on the ground and even the website, for example, down the line, those are a little bit more tactical, but the core strategy that's foundational, the elemental things that are needed for the brand and for the property should not be changing anyways. So once those are established, there's kind of a clearer path towards, potentially 3 different F&B concepts that you have. But at the underlying level, they're kind of all similar in a sense. So the foundational strategy is key, so that if something happens, if someone looks at a chef that they wanted to bring in 3 years before when they started thinking about this concept, they still have that strategy to look back on, like, who also fits this profile, who creates kind of the kind of menu that we want and the experience we want here, so that you can kind of refer back and be like, yes, this is still our direction. You might have to change a little bit of the interior potentially, but it's still at the core the same, and you don't have this Frankenstein project that's just a conglomeration of different elements that don't work together, which is really not ideal in any way.
Yeah. So for people listening to this and thinking, okay, what are those bits? Is it things like, are you lifestyle or are you a business hotel? Are you going for business people, leisure people? Are you in a tourist market? Then if you go a bit further down, is it one where you then set what level of hotel experience or level you're going to be? Then you start looking at zoning. Do you want to spar in there? Do you not want to spar in there? Do you want, games route? Like, is it that level of detail that you do nice and early that then kind of starts getting niched down closer to the time, or am I way off kilt and should I know
No,
absolutely
you're
nothing about
right.
it?
No, you have the process right, but we don't get into zoning and the architecture side of things. That's generally happens before we're engaged. But in terms of, for example, the strategy that we develop with clients, that helps determine, for example, like you said, if there's going to be a spa, what kind of spa treatments or wellness treatments should be there relative to the positioning of the brand and the guest that's coming. Certain amenities, obviously, we can craft some interesting names for them, things like that, that are really in line with what the brand concept is. We don't get into zoning, like I said, but yes, for sure, the process is there, because once you have the foundations of the position, the DNA, the story, if there's history, if it's a heritage property or anything like that, that's really informative and helpful. There's a lot of richness there. And then you kind of work up. You work up from this strong base that's true to the brand, and you know that guests will engage with. And then from there, you work up and build up the small tactical bits that'll achieve that goal.
Yeah. Okay. I get that now. Because I opened with in York, the Grand Hotel in York, in the UK, and it was an old railway building. So everything that went on it had tons of heritage. It was a listed building here in the UK, which means you can do very little to the architecture. The basement still had the vaults from where they used to keep the money and the records in like back in the old days. And it was very much everywhere in the hotel had a story as you were going round. So our main conference room was the boardroom. So it was still kind of retained with all the beautiful wooden walls and everything else that kind of went. And the way we curated the journey when you went into the conference room it was very much about going into the old boardroom of the railway building. So it's about finding those little nuances that go with the brand and then kind of working that through the whole experience, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And just to give you an example, it sounds like a beautiful property. I'm gonna have to take a proper look about the history there. But for example, that property had a set history and heritage there, but it could have gone in a very different direction. So if you think of that property, it could be used kind of more of a lifestyle, socializing, like a W almost style hotel, where it's really about being seen and kind of having like a nice cocktail bar there. While on the other hand, you could have more of a wellness-oriented hotel that's, the vault downstairs could be your spa, area, which is super, isolated and calming. So you have this base foundation, but you can actually take it in a lot of different directions. And that's worked through in the strategy with the ownership and with the managing team to figure out what direction you want to go in with what you have and kind of where you're geographically located as well. It's super important.
Yeah, perfect. And the spa was actually in the vault. The treatment rooms were where the vault doors were, and then there was a huge swimming pool in the basement. It was stunning. So yeah, wow. You hit the nail on the head. But and then like, what are the tips that you give to the owners, operators, hoteliers that you're working with when it comes to building a story? Like, how important is a story to a hotel?
I would say it's the most important in many ways, especially with if you're not a business hotel or anything like that. The story is everything in our opinion, because that builds long-term sustainability for the brand and also builds consistency for the brand. You know who you are, you know what you're offering, and you know your guests who will appreciate what you're offering. So the story is key in many ways and in more than one way, but I know there's a lot of different elements that go into the process in terms of feasibility, financials, market, and the geographical market as well. So in our world, the story is key because it's through and through. The tactics, like we said, the tactics might change, but the story is always there and will always be there.
Okay, perfect. And if we go and touch on the websites for a bit, because we talked a lot about this before. Like, what are some of the common mistakes that you see people make with websites, and how do you help kind of overcome some of those challenges as well and get those websites performing?
Yeah, the first one is story. A lot of the time there's not enough richness, or where there actually is richness. Sometimes for whatever reason, sometimes the properties just do the websites themselves real quickly. If they're smaller, they hire or they don't have staff internally to do those things and oversee the copywriting and image selection and things like that. But the story is not prominent on the website. So that's kind of the first thing which we discussed. But in a lot of ways as well, related to what you've been doing, the F&B offerings are a small paragraph on the website that don't really give you any indication of what you'll experience, what are the kind of the nice emotions that you want to feel and experience while you're at this concept. But I kind of piggybacking off what you had written, I think a few days ago, but looking at F&B not as a feature, but as an experience. Thinking, oh, the hotel has a restaurant. That's a nice to have. Like, it's nice in case we get hungry. It's on the property, instead of like, wow, let's book this hotel specifically because they have this amazing restaurant and we have to try it. There's a very big difference in thinking. It's not just like it's nice to have a mini fridge in the room. It's nice to have an F&B offering in the hotel, rather than, wow, this is an experience we have to have while we're on the property. It's like a must see. So changing the way people think about that, I think that's one of the things you say a lot, is like changing the way people think is critically important. So increasing the space given to F&B offerings on a website instead of a paragraph, dedicate a full page to it, really tell the story. If there's this famous chef, celebrity chef, talk about him or her, put your menus on the website. And if you have a reservation link, put that on there so that locals can know they can also book, instead of having it hidden behind something and kind of creating this distance. So a lot of little tactics, but generally storytelling, more content about it, and a richness of content that's super important.
Yeah, I often I have another question planned, which I'll ask in a minute, but I'll go to this one first. You know what I always think is funny about hotels and restaurants in hotels is when you go onto onto the hotel website and you're making a decision about going to stay somewhere. So I'll give you an example. I was looking the other week at Lisbon, and I'm going on and I'm looking at the hotels, and the number of hotels that then have like a little paragraph on their own website, but then link out to a restaurant website that sits separate. And some of the people I work with have exactly the same thing. So I'm not saying that I'm perfect by any means, but then I guess by doing that, you almost lose the traffic from your hotel website. So then do people go back because it links out, but it never links back to the hotel because there's this stigma about hotel F&B, and then it goes into a website that feels like an independent restaurant, and that's what they're trying to portray. But like when it comes to website, and I'm not experts in websites by any stretch of the imagination, but I do have an idea about things like SEO and keeping people on your website for longer, and how that then ranks with Google and things like that. Surely it's a better strategy to, if you do have an independent restaurant website because you want to focus on that side with the local community, fine. But surely it's just as good a strategy to replicate that within your own website, so that the hotel guests, like you say, are getting sold the dream of not just the rooms, but the F&B, maybe the spa, maybe the golf, maybe whatever else might be. But that whole linking out thing and not putting as much effort into the hotel side of it just seems a bit counterintuitive to me. Like, what's your thoughts on that as well?
It's exactly that. I think you make a great point that it's nice to have the independent restaurant website by itself, because this is the other side of the coin in terms of local. Having someone be able to see the restaurant website while not being on the hotel website is a nice feeling. You don't feel like you're a tourist in your own city in a way. So having the website separately is a good idea. But like you said, the F&B content on the hotel website should be richer. So if you have a full page about the concept itself, or for each concept, if you have more than one, is definitely the way to go. And if you have the budget and the opportunity to build a secondary website for the restaurant itself to really target the local community, if that's an option, definitely do that as well. They both play hand in hand and benefit each other.
For sure. And it's back to that whole thing of it. And I always say it's focus on. I got a DM actually from someone the other week, and he'd been given a restaurant opportunity in a hotel. He was a restaurateur, and he was saying to me, like, how many hotel guests should I work on that might come to the restaurant? And I was like, don't. Like, focus on the local community. And then when that restaurant is busy, your hotel guests will naturally want to go to it anyway. But my whole thing on the hotel F&B side is I book hotels based on restaurants, and I'm sure there's other people out there that do. So if I go to, say, Lisbon again, I search on Google restaurants in Lisbon, and this great restaurant comes up with, like, type of restaurant I'd want to go see, fits the bill, and all the rest of it. And I click onto it, and that's sitting on a hotel website. That may convert me into staying at the hotel because I go on and the look and feel is there. So my point that I guess I'm trying to get over here is put as much effort into the F&B page on your hotel website as you would do on the independent site in terms of look and feel, making sure that that brand story fits the restaurant, not the hotel as well, because it can convert bedrooms on the other side. So having that whole thing interchanging kind of makes sense. But I want to, that's me as an F&B guy. Over to you as the guy who curates websites. If I have the hotel, it has an amazing look and feel, amazing brand story. I go to the restaurants page and it's got 4 or 5 restaurants on there, and I click through, say, I don't know, Brasserie Hotel, and it changes the look and feel to the restaurant. Is that a bad user experience? Is that what you would want to see in terms of exuding that out? Like, it's hard because we're doing theoretical, but like, how in depth should you go?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wouldn't say necessarily that the whole user experience should change in terms of the F&B on the hotel website. It could be the case, especially if it's a branded F&B, branded in the sense that it's maybe an outlet from a franchise or an outlet or from celebrity chef that already has their own brand. You can make small adjustments there to keep it in line and consistent. Yeah, I'm not sure if I would personally recommend going full on change the whole look of the site as if you're on another website, just because that is jarring for the user, somewhat confusing as well. So maintaining the general look and feel of the hotel website with touches of whatever F&B concept you're bringing in. Yeah, story for sure. I just mean more visual cues that lend to that concept. Maybe that's where the integration would go, but not kind of a wholesale change of the look and feel. I think that might be a bit much. Yeah, you're spot on.
So you keep the look and feel, but then obviously the imagery might, so if you've been using squares or like the top headline image and stuff like that, that kind of follows the same suit, but obviously then you bring in the video or the imagery from the restaurant so that the feel kind of feels the same experience, but obviously the content sells in a different way, right? I guess that's the takeaway.
Yeah, for sure. You can have a different layout to that page of the F&B offering for sure, and it's actually a good idea to do that just to bring something fresh to the user if they're kind of browsing through the site and it's kind of pretty similar to what you've been seeing. Okay, here's your room. This is what your room looks like. These are the images of the room. When you go land on that F&B offering page, it's an opportunity to switch things around, keep it fresh. So layout is definitely something we can change, but definitely in line with kind of the overarching structure and guidelines that is consistent with the rest of the site, just so it doesn't feel too much of a change.
Makes sense. And I back to my experience of looking for hotels in Lisbon. I know of this hotel because someone I was following was staying at at this hotel. It's called the Lisboans, and I know from seeing some other people staying there and going on the tagged pieces on Instagram and stuff like that, that there was so many little touch points that made this stay so amazing for the people, from like breakfast in a bag on the door type thing on a morning where you got fresh juice and croissants in a bag and different little elements that went into it. When I go onto the website is great at selling, great story on there, but it doesn't talk about all the little secrets and the little intimate kind of details that go into the experience. Should those things be kept secret for people to like, don't spoil the surprise, or should you find a way to bring some of those in subtly? Like, what's your opinion? Like, how much surprise should you leave for when people get there, and how much should you tell people on the site? Because it must be a bit of a to and fro conversation with people at times, right?
Yeah, that sounds lovely, by the way. I think it's a fine line between how much you reveal and how much you kind of keep your cards close to your chest. I would say the surprise element, for sure, keep it a surprise. I think that's what makes it so special, is that it's unexpected. But I think there should be enough content on the website, for example, about the F&B offering, whatever it may be, that it's still satisfying for the guests to read that and make the decision just based on that, besides all the surprises. The surprises are a bonus. So kind of thinking of that as like, is this enough to get the guests interested and curious and excited? If yes, perfect. And then we'll add on top of that. I mean, that's kind of what hospitality is. It's going the extra mile and doing those little touch points that transform and create new experiences and memories. So that's kind of what I would personally recommend, is like, don't reveal your cards too soon, because everyone then can see them and be like, oh, I'm expecting it now. So yeah, that's what I would say regarding that.
Yeah, that's a really cool one. And in terms of, I always talk about kind of guest experience and putting a lot of effort into curating what that looks like, whether it's from a physical or a digital perspective nowadays. But certainly when I was in hotels and opening hotels, we would spend a lot of time to understand what the journey was from the minute they might have been picked up at the airport, if they're in a hotel car, to get into the front door, to get into the rooms, and etc. etc. But how important is that experience when you're curating the website design? Because I guess that is the first real touch point that these people get. So whether that's when they first hit the landing page, whether they're going through the experience, whether there might be some authentic kind of videos on there from guest teams, management, whatever that might be, all the way through to the comms. Like how important is that user experience to really start setting the tone for the hotel?
Super important. I think that that's the point where the tone is set. Generally, I think there's a certain amount of expectations that can be built through social media, but the website is the most flexible place where there's the richest amount of information all in one place. So it really sets the tone. And I think that the main difference, one of the key differences, let's say, between the website and other physical aspects, which we do help with print and things like that, but it's very material. So it's, you get a card, you get a welcome note that has a texture on it, has gold foil or whatever it might be. You sit on your linens, they're incredibly comfortable. It has a different sense to it. So what we're trying to do is translate some of those emotions to the website in whatever way we can. So through color psychology, through typography, through video, through images, of course, and also through animations. So that kind of helps set a little bit of the expectations and tone for the rest of the experience, ideally to be consistent on site. And yeah, I think there's also something to be said for the tech integration in terms of, let's say, your booking system. How does that look? Do you have a beautiful website and absolutely horrible to use booking system? Because that's not ideal either. So seeing where we can customize and create that consistency is key, because without consistency, like any relationship, trust breaks. So it's critical for the website to start building that up.
Yeah, and my next point was going to be on to kind of call to actions and making it easy to book. Now, there's the common thing, isn't there? Top right hand corner, you have your call to action button, whatever that is. It's the same on my website. It's probably the same on yours. Same on every hotel website I go to. But how important is call to action through the whole website journey? And then my next question was going to be, and you kind of touched on it, is how do you make that booking element really easy for people to do and really easy for people to understand? Because sometimes it can be quite confusing making a booking, can't it? Especially, I go with families and trying to get into connecting rooms and making sure that rooms are going to fit us all and things like that is tough, isn't it? So how important is that to conversion?
Super important. Like you said, I think the standard is there now. I think just purely because of all the studies that have been done on conversions on websites, and also how we read from left to right, and then zigzag is kind of a Z shape, and then obviously in Arabic it's the opposite. So the placement is kind of pretty standard. When you start messing with that just to create some cool designs, that's actually potentially hurting the website. Our client, we actually have kind of a sticky bottom navigation on mobile instead of the top one. It's just for reach, so it's easier to reach on mobile. It's linked to the menu as well as the book button and a language switcher. So those kind of formats are pretty standard and have been studied. But in terms of kind of making it easy to use and easy to understand, I'd say definitely once they click that, be able to have easy access to information like contact information in case they do want to ask questions, forms, things like that. It's very important. We actually did an audit for a property a month ago, and their contact form, their contact page didn't have a form on it. It was kind of just an email and a phone number, which it adds steps for the guest. It's like, hey, you have to now copy this email, open your email client, type it in, and then send it, or you have to call and go through a process that a lot of people don't want to go through. So we want to reduce friction for our guests. If they have information they want to look for, have an FAQ that answers the most common questions. What's your check-in policy, damage policy, deposits, etc., so that they can find the information quickly, and if needed, they can contact you also very easily. Yeah, I think that's sometimes overlooked.
Yeah, and I think it's funny that you should talk about audits, because it's the same when we go into businesses and we look at what the roadblocks are to people buying. Because the minute you make it difficult for someone to buy, back to what you were saying about kind of studies and things like that, it's really clear in studies that people just don't waste energy trying to buy things. They'll go elsewhere. And you talked about kind of emails and phone calls and things there. Like, how is online chat going to start coming into play in hotel websites? Is bots, AI bots, things like that going to come into hotel websites and kind of follow suit what's happening with energy companies and kind of big blue chip companies? Is that a place that we're going to get to eventually, or do you think it'll stay very similar to where we are now?
I think eventually adoption will be at a higher rate for sure. It's something that I also speak to on LinkedIn, is it won't replace the need for a proper brand positioning and brand DNA and concept. Like, this can help capture contact information, leads, help deliver information that they need, but it's not at the expense of, but not instead of the brand itself. Because I say a lot, like, you can have the most beautiful booking flow, or you can have the most amazing chatbot, but if someone lands on your property's website and doesn't connect emotionally to the brand, they're not going to say, oh, this is a cool chatbot, I'm going to book here now. So it's on top of brand. I always say, like, pouring fuel on the flame. Build the proper foundations first, build the brand and concept and storytelling, and attract the guest the right way first, and then you can really, really take off with integrating technology on top of that, because then it's just frictionless and it's easy and it's seamless. So that's kind of our way of thinking. But yeah, I do think it'll be more adopted, because the cost of the technology will get cheaper over time, just like anything else. And the smaller properties will then be able to kind of really start bringing that in, and it'll be much more widespread across those types of properties.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess one of the big challenges that you must come across working with boutique hotels, independent hotels, or unbranded hotels is competing with the larger chains who have huge budgets, can spend big on Google and XYZ and command positioning on booking.com and some of the aggregators and third parties. Like, do you change strategies if you went into a location and that little boutique hotel, or maybe big boutique hotel, sits within quite a few chains? Do you change the strategy for the way you build the website, the way you look at the website versus that? And how can some of these independent hotels compete with some of the big chains?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, like we mentioned, I think briefly in the beginning of the recording, we were discussing what are some of the options and opportunities for boutique hotels, and we discussed the flexibility, the creativity. I think those are two key points where they can distinguish themselves from those chains that might be nearby them, and the storytelling, of course. Also thinking, SEO, that's not something we do as a promotion. We do some basic SEO, but if you're in between a lot of chains, a lot of the time people are looking geographically at that region, which helps those smaller properties as well, kind of adjacent to the big ones. And we also try to leverage OTAs as free traffic almost. So kind of the billboard effect, where someone goes to an OTA, sees your website, sees your property, jumps to your website to just get more information. They're keen, they're discovering, they're curious. When they jump to your website, that's the opportunity. You just got some free traffic, hypothetically, from the OTA. And then if you're telling the right story, if you're consistent in your messaging and your tone and how you're communicating to the guests basically on your website, and it's attractive, that's a huge opportunity to basically get like a lot of free traffic and convert them. So if people are looking in that region and there's big chains there, generally it's an opportunity. And also leveraging the OTAs as kind of a pathway in to the direct booking from your website.
Yeah, that's some great advice. I'm the classic guy who goes on Booking.com and gets the list and then goes to the independent sites. It's just easy way to kind of narrow it down, isn't it? And then, you know, the imagery on those type of places on Booking.com and stuff is super important, I feel, because that is the one thing that makes me go to that, and the reviews makes me then go to the individual site. And then once I'm there, you know, because I've worked in the industry, I try and book direct and things like that. But yeah, I always go to the hotel site to get a feel for what it's really about, and then you might do Instagram and stuff like that. But that's a great tip for people to really think about those third parties as a way to channel traffic, isn't it?
Yeah, and I just want to add something to that as well. Is like you said, the pictures on the OTAs are really the only branded, quote unquote, branded things that the guest might see besides the copy. And the copy, generally, people are not going to read a paragraph of text on a website that has God knows how many properties. So once people land on those sites and they see the images, clean images, crisp, show the property well, ideally some lifestyle, imagine themselves there. Then, like you said, like you and myself, we go to the independent properties website and see what it's really about. How are they showing themselves beside this aggregator that has like, the thing is that you're seeing usually like 10 properties at the same time. Like, how are you supposed to stand out? The only way on those websites is the images. And if they then come to your website, you have a real opportunity to tell the story and show the USP. Like you said, it's very important. And I think it's kind of, it can be a quick tactic to really drive some more direct bookings in that manner.
Yeah, that's a great tip for anyone listening, is to really focus on that. And I know we do that in F&B with some of the third parties we work with, is really look at the imagery and the way they're portraying to try and help boost. So putting that into rooms makes total sense. In terms of like looking at the kind of the brand and the branding, the website, how much do you take the lead from things that might be happening on social media in terms of trends to help then put that into, whether that's online experience, whether that's when touch points in the hotel? So, for example, you know, again, I mentioned this to Heather Cox last week, but I was listening to Gary Vee, and he was saying 2024 is going to be the year of the lives, and everyone should be looking to get online, get live, and just go for it. And he was doing a team meeting, which was obviously like staged, but still, he was doing this team meeting. It was live on Twitch or X or one of them, and you could just sit in and watch him do his team meeting, basically. So I'm not necessarily saying all of a sudden you'll go live and do a live of people checking in at reception and things, but you know, like if I'm I always remember before I went to Dubai, and I moved to Dubai, I lived there for 5 years. There was a live stream from the top of the Atlantis, and I used to sit there in December, because we moved in March and we knew we were going early. I used to sit there in December in the UK, looking at the sunshine, looking at people in Aquaventure water park, and thinking, I'm going to get a slice of that when I get to Dubai. Like,
Yep.
Do you look at some of that for the right place? Obviously, resort hotels, whether that's bringing in video, whether that's a live feed to their Instagram, whatever that might be. Do you look at what's happening on trends in social media and think, how can I adopt some of that into the website experience to then help conversion?
Yes, in some ways, not more as tactics, not as an overarching strategy, like we said, but the strategy informs how you use the tactics. So, for example, just one point, actually, I'll mention two things. Just one point about the videos in the hotels. It's such a nice thing to see, like you said, the view and kind of from the top. I saw someone post on LinkedIn as well that, you know, it's a great little thing to do, is to have like a view of one of your amenities, like your pool, have a live thing to showcase on your website. For me, I was like, what about privacy? It's kind of for me personally, at least, I'm kind of, even if you have a little sign on property, be like, hey, this is live streaming, it's not comfortable for me. It's just that it's broadcast everywhere publicly, let's say. So that's just one point. But they said that, yes, you can put signs, and most people really don't mind. But for me personally, it's a bit of a no-go. But in terms of the live streams, like yeah, it's a tactic and it can be used smartly. For example, a wellness hotel, especially, I mean, during COVID, this could have been an opportunity, is that stream like a yoga class, and not just to your hotel, but to the public. So first of all, you're building your brand to a lot more people who might not know you. You might potentially attract the local community for that. And then you have the guests who already know you and you're like, yes, the brand is staying consistent with what they're talking about and what they stand for. And I'm still connected to them. You're keeping top of mind. So using like a tactic like live streaming through the programming of the hotel is an interesting part of the approach that could be taken.
And it's yeah, I'm with you on the privacy thing. I think especially in some of these luxury hotels, the reason people go there is to be incognito and things like that, isn't it? So it does make sense. This one in Dubai was looking back across the city, so it was like it didn't get any. You heard people in the water parks and stuff, but you never saw anything. So it's like it just showed the sun basically, which was enough for me, but it's definitely there. And in terms of like, when I'm going to flip back to the F&B side to be slightly biased, but what are some of the tools that if there's F&B people listening to this, what are some of the tools that they can go back to their GMs, their marketing teams to go, listen, this is how we can start kind of leveraging opportunities to grow revenues by doing X, Y, Z on the website? What would you kind of give them as the top tips?
For the website itself, it's kind of been what we've been discussing. Really give your F&B concept the light it deserves. The same way that your hotel should have a strong DNA and strong concept, your F&B concept should have the same. Like, what's the reason for disregarding it? What's the positive of disregarding it? I think inversion thinking can help with that. Yeah. So of course, dedicate the right amount of space to it. Tell the story the same way you tell your story about the hotel. Your F&B concept ideally has a rich story to it that attracts travelers and locals alike. Provide information to the guests ahead of time. Like, instead of having them have to reach out, like, is this available for locals? Having a simple reserve now button shows locals who are on the website and haven't booked with you yet that they can reserve. Dietary restrictions, also important for guests who are going to be, especially for resorts where there's not much else around. It's good to know what restrictions the restaurant can cater to, for example, or if it's purely, like an all meat restaurant, for example, Brazilian, Argentinian meat, steakhouse, like that's different. A vegan will not go there probably, and it's good for them to know that. So it's quite simple and overarching. It's just provide the right information, give them a way to contact you, show them the menu if you can, and tell the story. That's kind of the key thing. And some people overthink it, but I think those are the key things that we would say to do.
Yeah, I think there's some really good points there. And I guess final question here, just before I ask you to give a couple of kind of examples of where you've been able to help some hoteliers and independents kind of grow a business. But what are the emerging trends coming out of your space right now, whether that's for hotels, whether that's in the F&B space? What are you seeing that maybe isn't as common as people think and should be starting to look at?
I think, obviously, I have a bias toward brand, and that's really what I look at. So I do think that and I do talk about this as well in some of the content, is that the standard of what people are expecting from brands is increasing. So having that leverage throughout the experience, whether it's your website, whether it's your on-site experience, people are expecting more from hotels and restaurants in general. So there's no real way that you can just sit back and think that it's gonna go like smoothly. Everyone's adapting, everyone's evolving. So the standard and quality of brand that's being developed is increasing tremendously now. It's being exposed even more. So I think brand development and brand concept have always been key, but I think will be even more key moving to the future. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you can still hear me. The video is a little bit off now. Perfect. If you can still hear me, we can just continue. Yeah. So that for sure. Trends, I'm not keen on trends really. I think they're useful tactics and ways to capture attention and leverage some new technology, for example, like chatbots and things like that. But I think foundationally, the strategy is the most important thing. And telling the story the right way. So I would say trend-wise, chatbots, AI technology, for sure, it's going to have an impact. I'm not denying that in any way. But I do think that eventually, some people might swing back the other way and be like, I want to talk to a human, I want to talk to a person. So I would say being cognizant of what's around and what's available in terms of technology, and really thinking strategically about how it can be used rather than adopting it immediately and hoping that it's going to be the saving grace.
Yeah, there's some really good tips. I think I'm with you on a couple of those. I think storytelling is going to become so important moving forwards because it's the way people can really stand out in the crowd. And I think, the way the market's going, certainly from my experience, is they're going to authenticity and people being seen like genuine experience. And I think by being able to give people that authenticity and show kind of the history and the heritage, as you were talking about before, I think is what's going to put people apart. And then I think you're absolutely right. And I think the digital bit's an interesting one, isn't it? Because when it first came into the industry, a lot of people were kind of going, "Oh, it's a way to cut staff, and it's labor's tight, so it's a way to do it." But actually, I think what's starting to evolve now is that we have to give people choice when they come to, whether it's the restaurant, whether it's a hotel, whatever environment that be. So if I take room service, for example, we still need to have the telephone there where the guest can ring an order down if he wants to speak to someone. But we also need to have that digital piece there that means people can order online if they wish, and they can go with the convenience and all the rest of it. And I think it's that real bit about choice is going to be so important in terms of having the personal experience with the digital experience. And that's exactly what you were saying there is have the bots for people who want to use bots, but have the phone for someone who might just want to ring up and speak to the receptionist and say, what, I'm planning a really special weekend. Can you put some roses in the room? And someone says yes. And sometimes that personal confirmation is better than a bot that you have to print out and take with you in case someone's not picked it up, isn't it? So I think you really did you hit the nail on the head with a couple there, and it's quite nice that those are they're not gimmicks. They're not, like you were saying, you're not really into trends. It's like going back to basics about what hospitality is all about, isn't it? Is giving people choice and keeping it personal and kind of just making people go away and have those memorable moments.
I would ask you a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Do you prefer physical menus or digital menus?
I hate digital menus. Hate them. I'm the type of guy that when I get there and there's a QR code, I always ask where the physical one is, because I'm just not. It's the whole thing. I went to this one restaurant in London with a friend. He lives in Vietnam. I hadn't seen him for about a year, and the first 10 minutes of our dinner together was looking at each other's phones because we were choosing what to eat. And I looked around the restaurant and everyone was doing the same, and there was like no conversation. So I don't like it, but I think, that it has a place in places like rooms. I think absolutely. Like if you don't have it in your rooms, you're making life difficult for your team and for the guest. And I think out by kind of terrace areas, pool areas, beach clubs, cabanas, things like that, I think that there's a place for them there. And I'm not necessarily sure it's about the first transaction. I think it's the follow-up transactions and the second orders and the convenience of getting a drink when you want it and things like that, I think is the place for it. But no, where do you sit on digital menus?
You hit the nail on the head. I think it has its place, and that's kind of what we were talking about, like strategically using technology in the right place. And that example is actually exactly the one you mentioned at the restaurant when you're looking down at the phone trying to figure out what you want to eat. That's exactly the thing that hampers, even though it's subtle, it hampers the guest experience. Because imagine you're sitting with your family and you're all looking down at your phones. You reunion like me now with my family here in Cyprus. No one wants to be looking down at their phone. Then, get up. What did you think? What are you going to get? It's kind of the menu. You pass it to your partner. You pass it to your mom or dad. It has a tactile feel to it. So yeah, I think there's a place for technology for sure. There's no denying it. I think it's just where do we use it, and how much of it do we use to benefit the guest experience. If it's like that example in the restaurant, I don't think it's a great idea personally.
No, no, and do you know it's funny? One of the clients I'm working with um, had it. The menu is in a hotel lounge, has the menu on an iPad, so it's got the full drinks menu and then it's got the food menu at the back, like you probably would do if it was printed. You'd have the cocktails first, then the wines and the spirits, and then you have the food at the back. And it's funny, but sales have dropped and it's because there isn't an iPad on every table. So a guest might be there for come in and they might sit there for a coffee, do a couple of business meetings, and then say they want to hang out somewhere for an hour before they go off next. That menu looking at them, sometimes people just look at it and look at it and look at it and actually go, do you know what? Actually, I'm hungry. Let's just have a flick through. And then they might order something. And what we
Mhm.
found there is that that recognition of the menu being there, the fact that people have to ask for the menu because it's on an iPad that clearly doesn't sit on every table, that we've lost out of those impulse purchases that we might have had before. So yeah, okay, there's all the stats to say that digital ordering increases average check and increases order value and things like that. But what we found is that that doesn't compensate for the impulse stuff that's been lost because it's now not readily available. And we're bringing it back. The reason the hotel did it there was that they have a sustainability mission and what have you. So we're now looking at how we can working with a company here in the UK where you send your old coffee grinds to them and that then goes into being made into paper and then they ship
Oh,
it back to you. So you've still got this really nice sustainability piece around food waste and things like that. But there's going to be a physical menu back on the tables to try and help promote it. So yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? And there's like everyone you meet kind of has a different opinion, but I think it's
do,
got to be embraced. But exactly what you say, it has to be done in the right way at the right time for the right venue and the right place.
yeah, and would you think that's a great example? That's very interesting. The what you noticed from the digital ordering versus kind of having the menu there. I would ask you, do you think that's, when you have the menu there, you're seeing potentially things that are appetizing you, even if you're not ordering now, you're still seeing that maybe that Manhattan that you want to order later on, or the little
Yeah.
shrimp bites that you want. So having it physically there primes, I think, the sensation of, hey, I should get a drink, I should get a coffee, I should get something to eat. When it's not there, you're kind of just sitting in the space, which might be beautiful for that part, but I think that might be potentially causing that, that drop.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you just have to look, don't you, as well, and look at why have supermarkets had sweets by the checkouts for so long is because when the kids got bored, it was the way the parents kept them quiet while they were waiting to pay, wasn't it? And, why do they now have magazines there and things? So they're not allowed to have confectionery. So I think that whole thing around like making people crave what's available is there's a huge emotional piece about that, isn't there? And then when you do that, then it's about making it really easy for them to buy. So, I aren't a big believer in QR codes, but I am a believer in pay at table. And I think when someone asks for the check or wants to leave, there's nothing more frustrating than waiting and trying to find someone to pay. And I think that whole piece around how you can bring a check with a QR code that then they can scan and do through Apple Pay and stuff like that. I think that's got its place where it can then help the guest do the transaction easier and
For
quicker.
sure.
It can make the turnarounds quicker as well. So I think it's not always about the obvious bits, but some of the inobvious bits are the ones that can help make it more seamless. And it's back to that, on websites. I'm sure it's a thing for. I'd love to. I don't know whether you track the stats or whether you've got it there, but it'd be really interesting one to find out is, if you put Apple and Google Pay onto the payment options, like does it make people more likely to buy or not? Because I always think it's, why is Amazon so dangerous? Because it's really easy to press buy now and pay, isn't it? And I'm sure there
Yeah.
must be a stat around Apple Pay and Google Pay being exactly the same, than getting your card out and putting it into your browser.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact stats or where the stats came from, but I read this last year that yes, it does increase conversions, especially on mobile, and especially for people who are potentially doing business travel, kind of obviously looking at properties, they're making a decision. They're not making much other considerations, just like yes, no, am I staying in this hotel? There are conversion improvements there. And it's a nice thing to have. And it also shows generally when you see, at least when I see Apple Pay and Google Pay available on a payment gateway, I know that they've integrated with a secure payment processor.
Mm.
So a lot of the time, it's just a credit card. You might type in your credit card, like, oh man, am I sure I want to do this right now? I don't want any chargebacks or anything like that. So seeing that as a signal as well of trust in a way for the guests to see, like, okay, they're integrated with the right payment processor, and I can put in my information, whether it's card or directly with Apple Pay.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I have one last question, actually, seeing as we're on a bit of a roll, if that's okay.
Of course.
When you're looking at a hotel, and you've just said it now about business people, obviously it's a much less emotional transaction or conversion, I guess, and they look for very different things. Well, I guess, is that right? Or do you change strategy in the way the website's laid out if it's a business hotel versus, say, a leisure or a tourist hotel, or does it stay fairly similar?
So we haven't worked on a business hotel, but the question I would ask, just how we frame the way we think, is that you had mentioned that maybe they're not looking emotionally for a hotel; it's more functional.
Yep.
But I'll ask you, for example, and this leads back to what we're talking about, is, for example, they're looking for desks in the rooms, and high-speed internet, etc. Underneath that functional desire is actually an emotion. So, for example, why do they want a comfortable desk and fast internet? What would you say is the answer to that? Kind of from your experience.
I mean, I'm always the same. It's because you want to work and you want to do your calls, and there's nothing more frustrating than not being connected when you're away. I used to find it terrible when we'd stay in a hotel with terrible Wi-Fi, and it'd be a pain to try and FaceTime the kids. I would never go back based on that, for that reason. So,
and that's an emotional thing as well. Of course, this is a family related thing, but if you can't, if there's emotions of frustration, of disappointment, of a lack of security, let's say insecurity in the sense of, let's say you're doing a very important business call, it would really be frustrating and awful, and you'd feel bad if you couldn't do your work and miss an opportunity. So the emotion underneath there is a feeling of safety and security and trust in the property, that they will deliver these functional aspects that are layered on top. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's maybe less emotional. There's less maybe of a transformation, like with kind of wellness travel and leisure with family and resorts. But within business travel as well, the sense of quiet, for example, if you're in a business hotel that's promoting a sense like, hey, our walls are double insulated, you won't hear anything from outside, you can rest in peace after your long trip. The functional bit is the interior and the kind of fitting of the hotel, but the emotional bit is feeling relaxed and feeling at peace when you reach your hotel. You have to put earplugs in because the neighbor in the other room is having a party. So there's always emotional cues underneath there. It's just a little bit more subtle with business travel, and you can still touch on them and poke those to really get them out.
Yeah, so it's very much around going, okay, what are the touch points that the guest wants from a stay, whether that's leisure, business, spa, whatever it might be, and how do you solve those touch points and make sure that then that's articulated into the messaging on the elevator pitch for the bedrooms, or whether that's in the bit where you get the amenities and it always tells you there's a shower, there's a bath, there's a XYZ. And it's about making sure that those touch points are catered for, isn't it, in terms of getting that in there so that it hits that comfort and kind of satisfies the urge to know whether it's the right place to stay, right?
Always. I think that's always the key. Even people looking for functional characteristics of a room or of a hotel, speaking to what those functional characteristics, what's the outcome of them, from whether it's something the person gains or if it's something emotional, speaking to those shows understanding, it shows care, and it shows that you know why they need this functional thing. So high-speed internet, you can get all your work done, you can be able to download your important files or send important files. Those are all kind of high-level things, but then deep down, you're going to feel fulfilled that you're actually able to finish your work while you're traveling abroad with your family or whatever it might be, or taking paid time off or whatever. So there's always something underneath there. We just have to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. It's a really good point. It reminds me of when I was in Australia over Christmas, New Year, and I had to do a call with the UK. It was like 10 o'clock at night, Sydney time. And I went down into the hotel, all day dining lounge and what have you. And there was only me and the waitress in there. And I found it really difficult to find a table with a plug. My kids were sleeping in the bedroom upstairs, so I couldn't go back upstairs. Really difficult to find a plug because it was always those house plugs that you can never plug into. And when I did, the lighting was like really bad, so people could hardly see me on the screen. And then the music was so loud that it was just like the call was just a write-off. And it's those little niggly things, isn't it, that can make a big difference to a guest stay and kind of make that experience what it should be. And I think that's sometimes, what you don't get over enough, if people don't want to sit in the room because they've been away and they want to just see people and see activity, is it still a place where you can go and work? Is the plugs there? Is the lounge open when you need it, etc., etc. So I think that's a brilliant place to end. Go on. No, go on.
Yeah, we can end it there. I would ask specifically about that experience. Would you say that you were looking for comfort in that space?
I was someone away with the family who was working, and I needed somewhere I could go to do my calls back with the UK that was comfortable, and all I needed was a plug and some decent lighting and decent Wi-Fi. I wasn't looking for anything I didn't need it at the table at the right height. I didn't need like attention. I didn't need any of that. But it was a lounge, and some of those it's a city centre hotel in the downtown Sydney. Like you couldn't get, if you put a pin on the map in Sydney, it would probably be where the hotel was. And there was business people in the hotel and things like that. And it just didn't hit the mark, because when I needed it to be there, it just wasn't. I didn't book the hotel because of that, and it wasn't a major deal. But it's just, I think sometimes that's where, because the F&B isn't curated properly, it doesn't tell people what it is. So I had been in that hotel 3 days, and it was busy all through the daytime. To be fair, I'd never seen it late at night. It looked like a hotel lounge where people would go and work. There was people in there with laptops and things like that. When it came to using it, actually, I found that it was pretty bad for people to work in. And it was a bit of a letdown. I've told that story now probably 3 times. I think I've told it on the podcast about twice, but it really is those little bits where if it had been one of those where it had been positioned right as an outlet, I might have not even considered it to be a place I could go and work or go and do a call, because it was positioned in the right way. And I guess it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. I might have wanted to go down and have a drink at the end of the night and just sit there in peace and quiet, and it would have been perfect. But it just goes to show, doesn't it, how you can't please everyone, and you've got to lay your marker down in the peg and stick to what you want to be.
Yeah, it goes back to exactly what we were saying. If it, like you said as well, if it was marketed as such, you wouldn't even have the expectation of going down and working there. But if they're marketing as kind of a co-working F&B space, that's a totally different thing, and it would have been equipped the right way. So, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, Omer, thank you very much for coming on. We spoke before, and I always find what you say is so valuable. If people are listening to this and want an audit on their website or want to revisit their branding, what's the best way to get in touch with you to have a chat?
Yeah, obviously LinkedIn is kind of the primary place where I am. That's where we got introduced to each other. So LinkedIn, Omar Boubis, and obviously our website, studio-circa.com, where you'll see some of our work. If you want to reach out that way, that's available to you as well.
Perfect. And I'll put both in the show notes as well. So if you're listening to this and you want to reach out to Omer, then the link will be in the show notes. But listen, Omer, thank you very much again. Really appreciate your time and coming on, and look forward to speaking again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and likewise, let's do it again sometime soon.
You've been listening to Hospitality Huddles, where hospitality meets conversation one huddle at a time. Hospitality Huddles is brought to you in partnership with Auden Hospitality, Visit the website at www.audenhospitality.com. Thanks for listening and see you next time.